your questions in the chat. The chat is located when you hover over your screen. You'll see the control bar like you see on my screen. And by clicking that caption box, it opens up the chat for you. Ophelia and Carmen are in the chat answering questions. Ophelia and Carmen, if you guys want to say hey.
Hi, everybody.
And
hi,
Carmen,
everyone. Welcome. Good afternoon.
So Ophelia and Carmen will answer your questions as best as they can. And FYI, the chat is available to you after the meeting ends. If you click on the left-hand side in the top left of your team on the app bar, chat, you should see the chat with all the resources that were shared in the chat. In addition, Audrey sent this to me earlier today. One of the things that we would like is for you all to promote what's happening on social media. I'm sure you all are on some aspect of social media, one of these platforms or a few of these platforms. So if there was something from today's webinar that helps you, that that you needed, please share it on social media. You can add a screenshot. You could just type, thank you, Education Fund, for providing this for the teachers in Miami-Dade. Whatever it is that you would like to say about what the Education Fund is doing, that would be very beneficial for them, because they will, people will be able to see what they're doing for you. And it helps for the donors to see what their money is going towards, right? Correct, Audrey?
Right. So we're a nonprofit that raises money from the private sector and puts it right back into public school education in this county. And a lot of that support comes in the way of the grants that we offer, the extra training that we offer, our expo, our Ocean Bank Center that has the warehouse with free supplies for teachers. So when we see teachers posting and tagging us, tagging Ford, tagging Ocean Bank, that just helps our donors give us more money, which means we can give more money to you. So it all comes full circle. So a simple little social media post saying, thank you, Education Fund and Ford and TD Bank and, Assurant, FPL, or just Education Fund. If it's too much work, it just really helps us get more money for you. So that's all.
And Audrey, if you want to put the names in the chat. I know I showed it on the screen, but in case they want to copy and paste, you could put it in the chat where you emailed me.
Oh, you mean for the sponsors?
No, for the social media handles.
Right. Well, all of those are right here, and I'll type in the ones from our sponsors. But even if you just do Education Fund, we'd greatly appreciate it. It goes a long way in helping us raise money, and that money goes right back into your the work that you're doing. Okay. All right. I'm going to turn it back over to Michelle.
Okay, so again, guys, welcome. So we've talked about all the basic things, thanking the sponsors that you see on the screen. And this webinar is brought to you by the Education Fund. So thank the Education Fund and the Impact 2 program for providing this. I'm going to jump right in on our agenda today. We're going to talk about those 6 topics that you see. The title of this webinar is Getting Started. Tomorrow at 4, we will talk about technology tools and tips for remote learning. So to start, I want to share some facts about remote learning, because there is a lot of misconceptions going on in terms of remote learning, distance learning, virtual schooling. Remote learning happens when there is a need to close your school, kind of like what we're going through right now. It's closed kind of like at the last minute. So in this case, it's very unrealistic to expect not just educators, but for parents and families to be able to deliver the content that is required and to kind of consume the content that's required. It's unrealistic to think that we can cover everything that we would in a face-to-face classroom in this kind of remote learning environment. That is just, it's unrealistic. And that's not how we should approach it. There's just not enough time or resources to be able to deliver that face-to-face, what we would in a face-to-face classroom in an online setting. So the number one goal for remote learning is to continue learning for students, to provide them with an opportunity to still continue learning what they need to learn, but not necessarily give them everything we would in the face-to-face setting. We want to understand that things need to be simplified. You need to simplify the content. You need to simplify the processes in which the content is given to the students and the expectations that we have of students. Keep things simple. And one of the other big tips is to show grace and provide options for help. So we're going to start here with the students because really the students, they're key, right? And they're home with their families. So we have to have considerations for students and families when it comes to this remote learning period that we're going through. So I really want to start with this quote, compassion over content. Now more than ever, we need to put compassion first, strive to help students learn to grow and develop resiliency through this challenging time. Every student has a different situation. There are students who are not in their homes because they were, dislocated because of COVID. There are students who have to who may not, be with their families because they have illnesses or their family members have illnesses. We have to consider all of these things and put compassion over content. We have been hearing so many complaints, so many frustrations that kids and families are being overloaded with work. Again, going back to the mentality of we have to do everything in the way that we were doing it in the face-to-face classroom. And that is just not the case with remote learning. So some other reminders: relationships before rigor, grace before grades, patience before programs, love before lessons. I mean, these things sound simple, but this is what is needed during this time. Yes, the learning continues, but we have to really put the students and families, put them at the forefront. So I saw this on social media, and it really makes me think. We have never gone through this in my lifetime. I have never been through anything like this with the remote learning, and the kids are going through it now. So we do need to cut them some slack. We don't know what their technology is at home, what their bandwidth is at home, what their situations are at home. We have to cut them some slack, and we have to put compassion over content, because a stressed student cannot learn. Families may not have Wi-Fi that is stable. I know that I have Wi-Fi here, but my Wi-Fi is unstable, and there are many mornings when I wake up that we don't have Wi-Fi, and we have to get on a hotspot for my daughter to attend her online class at 8 o'clock in the morning. Ophelia lives in a rural area, and her bandwidth is very slow, and she has to be in a certain spot in her house to have internet, and she has to also share that with her son, so they cannot be on the internet at the same time, and she's a teacher. So we have to make those considerations. Students need to share devices with siblings or even their parents. Older siblings may be charged with the care of younger siblings. Students may need to process a family member who is not healthy. So these are all things that we must consider. This is also something I saw on social media. And again, it is not specific to, any particular student, but it is something that makes you think about compassion first, compassion over content. And I know this is a list, and I'm not going to read this list, but what I want to focus on is that there are students who are working. There are parents who have lost their jobs. I was talking to one of my friends, and she was saying that she was talking to her students, and most of the students on her call, their parents have lost their jobs, except for one. Okay, so we have to put these things into consideration when we are dealing with remote learning. So here are some questions that you can help to guide you as you're coming up with your plan for remote learning. How will your students' needs for technology, bandwidth, family factors, etc., impact what you do? How will you stay connected to your students and your families? How can you help students and families structure their day? What could you do to guide students in choosing a productive workspace in their home? And what tools will you use to facilitate your remote learning experience with the considerations to families with multiple children in the household? Now, that's something to think about, that last question, because you may have families that have 2 or 3 kids or 4 kids. I have a friend with 4 kids, and every single child is using 2 different tools for remote learning. That parent has to keep updated on 8 different tools, because those teachers are deciding to use so many tools for, for each grade level. So we have to think about the tools that we're using and try to streamline the process. All right, so at this time, I will pause for a second since we just talked about students. And if there's anything in the chat that Ophelia or Carmen that you guys would like to bring up or answer, I'll give you guys an opportunity to do that. If not, we're going to move right on to the next topic. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next topic. All right, so now we're going to talk about what a remote learning structure looks like. We have to think about that students are going to be, and teachers are, and parents are going to be transitioning from very a highly structured environment where the students are in school for 6 hours a day to a day with little structure. And we realistically, we should not expect ourselves as teachers and students and families to sit in front of a device from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. or whatever your workday looks like. You should not be sitting in front of a device for those 6 hours. Just because they were in front of you in the classroom for 6 hours does not require them to sit in front of you for 6 hours during a school day. Some things to think about. Students and teachers do need a structure that allows them to connect at designated times throughout the day, not just from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m., but at designated times. Students and teachers need a structure that allows them to collaborate on tasks and complete their class requirements. Students and teachers need a structure that allows them to chat or talk or communicate with each other as needed, to share important updates or just to do basic check-ins. So we have to think about those things, and we also have to think about what our learning structure is going to be. There are 2 types of structures when we think about online learning. There is synchronous and there is asynchronous. Synchronous learning is when we're learning together at the same time. So you guys, the teachers, and Audrey and me, Ophelia and Carmen, we're all learning together. This is an example. This kind of online meeting is an example of synchronous learning. Asynchronous learning happens if you give a student iReady and they're doing that on their own time. So how are you going to merge the two? Which structure are you going to utilize for your remote learning environment? So it can be online meetings, it could be questions, that you pose in a discussion post, or the feedback that you provide to students when they submit work to you and you provide feedback at different times. It could be assignments that you ask them to complete, for example, Gizmos, iReady, Ingenuity, and it could be virtual conferences as well. So I am going to share with you in the next few slides information that comes from Miami-Dade County Public Schools, from the icp.dadeschools.net website, the Instructional Continuity Plan. So they have offered content delivery models for remote learning. There are 3 options. The first option is the teacher-directed instruction. And again, this information comes straight from icp.dadeschools.net. So they have the option of doing a teacher-directed instruction where you provide your resources and your instructions. You can record, let's say you use PowerPoint recording to record your lectures and you share that with students. You communicate with them through a phone or through the messaging in one of the platforms you're using. And you're using the selected materials that you have. For example, your online textbook, you can be using just those online resources that you have available to you, which we'll mention a little bit later. Then there is self-paced online instruction. So you're starting to see how the synchronous and the asynchronous is kind of working out in these 2 models. So resources are accessed through the portal. You're giving the students instructions on what they need to do in these different platforms, whether it's Ingenuity, iReady, Gizmos, iCivics, whatever it is. And the students are communicating with you through whatever platform you're using, or through phone, or through email, whatever it is. So those are the two models. The third model is a hybrid approach. So it's kind of a combination where you have both asynchronous and synchronous learning together. So yes, you're still using your materials. You are providing them with recorded or live sessions, like those online meetings, like what we're doing. They are utilizing the district licensed resources like Edgenuity, and then their communication is there through the digital platforms that you use. So think about what those three structures were that I just talked about, and think about what tools are available, are out there, what tools are being utilized, and what they can do, and what you can do to streamline everything into one tool or two tools at that. Because what ends up happening is you're doing calls with one, you're doing chats with one, you're doing assignments with one, you're doing collaboration with one, and you end up with too many tools where you can have one single tool that does all of those things. Okay, so please mute yourselves. So here are some of the tools that have been utilized so far in the district. We'll start from the bottom. Google Voice was recommended during the PD day that you guys have. It's a great tool to utilize if you just want to make phone calls and kind of not share your phone number with the parents and families. Zoom can be used for online meetings, and that the district is asking that you use the Zoom integration with Microsoft Teams. Some teachers have already been using Remind, and Remind can be used for communication and file sharing. Please note that when you use Zoom, students do have to create an account, and you have to add them, or they have to add themselves with the code. Class Dojo is also a tool, and that can be used for communication and file sharing as well. The same thing here. Students, families create an account and add a code to join your class. Edmodo, you can do collaboration, you can do communication, you can do content, assignments, grades. Edmodo is not district rostered. That means that the students have to create an account and they have to add a code to join your class. Then you have Microsoft Teams, which does have collaboration, communication. You can share content and materials. You can have assignments. You can have grades. You can have online meetings in Microsoft Teams, just like you would a Zoom meeting. So you don't even need Zoom when you're using Teams, because you can do the online meetings in Teams. What we're doing right now is a Microsoft Teams meeting. So you could do the same thing with your students, and it has the chat capabilities. It has the screen sharing capabilities. Microsoft Teams also has app integration, where if you're using other Microsoft tools like PowerPoint and Word, Microsoft Forms, those can be seamlessly integrated in the app. Microsoft Teams is district rostered. Your students have been added to a class in Teams, and Microsoft Teams is single sign-on for students, so they don't have to create an account. So look at the list, think about what you're using, and think about what's the easiest thing for you and your students to utilize at this time. Okay, and just an FYI, tomorrow's session will go a little bit more in depth with these tools. Okay. So here is, again, this is an example, district recommended structure. So the district has rostered your students in Microsoft Teams. In Microsoft Teams, you can have that asynchronous and synchronous and teacher directed and self-paced and hybrid content delivery within Microsoft Teams. So what you're seeing is a Microsoft class team with an example of those different requirements that you can have in a class, in a class. Okay. So we're going to move on to start thinking now more about our workspace and what that looks like. So by now you should have thought about your structure and what structure you're going to use. So let's think about what your workspace actually should look like. So a space that promotes productivity, that's comfortable, that has good lighting, and you can even utilize headphones to allow for your sound to project better. Here is an example. I wanted to just show you a few pictures of what some teachers' workspaces look like. you could tell from even this one, it's just a little bulletin board she posted on her wall, and this one, just a little, blackboard thingy she put back there. But your students are seeing you, and you want the workspace to be inviting for them, especially the little ones. So try to be, and teachers are very creative. Try to be creative in your approach for your remote learning spaces. So I wanted to just show you guys these examples so you can see what other teachers are doing. Okay, so when it comes to your structure, what does your remote learning structure look like? Are you including opportunities for synchronous or asynchronous learning? What digital tools will you use to facilitate your remote learning experience? What rituals and routines does your school have, or even, what rituals and routines did you have in your classroom that you would like to honor in your class during remote learning? It could be, maybe it's a daily journal that you would still like for students to participate in. So what rituals and routines would you still like to carry on during remote learning? And does your workspace help you meet your goals of productivity and engagement? And think about your workspace and what you can even share with the students and families to help them with their own workspaces. Okay, and at this time, Ophelia, Carmen, anything in the chat that you guys want to bring out, that you want to ask, please do so. If not, we're going to move on.
Go ahead, move on.
Okay. Now we're going to talk about scheduling. You should have a structure, but you should also have a schedule. What does your week look like? What does your day look like? And remember, we're not talking about 6 hours a day, 5 days a week. So we have the district recommended schedule here for elementary. You can see that for each subject area, they are required, different time frames, but it's definitely not 6 hours a day for school the way that they would normally spend. The time frames are definitely not that. So we want to try and adhere to these recommended schedules for our particular subject areas for our grade level. I want to just pause here to give you a moment to look at this, because again, this is important for us to consider. Just because for language and literacy, for pre-kindergarten now, 3 hours and 20 minutes a week, 40 minutes a day. Just because it says that I need to have 40 minutes a day with students does not mean that I need to have an online meeting with them 40 minutes every single day. Think about asynchronous and synchronous opportunities for learning. You could meet with them for 40 minutes or for 20 minutes twice a week. And then the other time you're providing synchronous, learning tasks for them to complete with their families at home. Or you make yourself available for office hours to meet with the students that need to be met with, and you don't necessarily have to meet with the whole class. But these times you should really consider what you're doing for synchronous and asynchronous learning to meet the qualifications for these times. Okay, we're going to go to secondary so you can see it. So again, secondary, obviously more time is required because the students are older. But again, you don't have to meet with them for 60 minutes every single day if you teach mathematics in high school. Opportunities for synchronous learning and asynchronous learning can be applied here as well. Especially because the students are older, you may want to give them more autonomy with the work that they're required to do. And this is where you can pull in those resources, those district resources that you have access to. Discovery Ed, Edgenuity, iReady, Myon, those kinds of things. You can, and then especially Myon for elementary. You can pull those things in. Okay, and that's for secondary. And here we have the recommended schedule that's modified for elementary and secondary students. That's E.S.A. modified. So you could see the time frames are a little different here for each subject area. Oh, yes, and Reading Plus. Absolutely. Reading Plus in secondary. Okay, so this is an example of a weekly schedule for a teacher. Every day is focused on one thing that they're doing for their students. On Mondays, they're creating their check-ins and their announcements for the week. Like this can be like your week at a glance. What does this week look like for my students? Excuse me. So you're doing that weekly check-in with your students, and you're giving them their week at a glance announcement with reminders of things they need to know for the week and what's coming up. On Tuesdays, you focus on assignments. So you create your assignment, you create the guidelines, and you come up, you add resources to these assignments that students will need. These resources could be links to videos that you pre-record. The resources could be links to like tutorials that you find online, but you're providing the assignment guidelines and giving the students resources that can help scaffold the learning for them because you're not physically there with them. Wednesdays is when you can have your online meeting with students. So this would be like what we're doing now. So you have your online meeting, you're delivering content to them, you're presenting information to them, you're sharing content. These online meetings aren't just you looking at them and them looking at you. This is where you would take advantage of having every child in class, so to speak, in the online class, and you're sharing content. This is your opportunity to teach them. So you have these online meetings, and of course you have to, it's recommended that you have a time frame. You wouldn't want students to sit in an online meeting with you for 2 hours. You're certainly going to lose them. So we'll talk more about the structure of the online meetings in a few minutes, but definitely have a day where you're scheduling your online meetings with your various classes. And this is an opportunity too for the students to be able to ask you questions about the assignment that you posted the day before, or questions about the reminders or week at a glance that you posted on Monday. And with these online meetings, they will have access to chat. So you can definitely have discussions in the chat as well. On Thursdays would be your opportunity to provide virtual conferences for students and families, or office hours where you're available during certain times for students to just kind of pop in and ask you questions. Or you have scheduled virtual conferences where the students are meeting with you, asking you, like having a one-on-one meeting to ask you questions. And then on Fridays is where you could focus on like discussion, collaborative work, we'll just call it that. You can post questions for discussions that students are required to follow specific guidelines in their response, and they can reply to classmates so they can, so they can have some aspect of collaboration still within the virtual environment. It's really important that you follow a schedule. Following a schedule is very important, and it helps to keep you sane, and it gives the kids a routine and a structure that they are used to. Okay, so here's an example of what a weekly schedule could look like for elementary, and I'm giving you like a school-wide view because sometimes I've heard from parents basically that they have children in elementary schools, and their child was meeting at the same time with an online meeting, but they only had one device, right? And so having some kind of structure school-wide for elementary can really alleviate the issue of having conflicts with different grade levels and meetings. So I'm just giving this to you as a guide to show you that it is definitely possible for an elementary school to have a schedule where each grade level, each subject area can meet at times that don't overlap. And then when it comes to high school, I should have said secondary school. When it comes to the secondary level, there are many subject areas, many class periods, and then you have teachers that teach various subjects. So the best recommendation for that is to follow your class schedule. You want to have the online meetings, your synchronous schedules during your online class times, because you never want to choose a child to have to choose if I'm going to go to my AP Human Geo class or am I going to go to my English class because both teachers are meeting at the same time? So really try to, for secondary level, try to stick to the schedule that you guys already have, because you don't want conflicts with scheduling, and you don't want the kids to have to choose which class they're going to attend for that day. Okay. All right, so questions to consider for scheduling. Why does your remote learning day, what does your remote learning day and week look like? What traditions do you have in your classroom that you want to make sure to honor with students while you have them with you in those meetings? How long will students be expected to be online participating in remote learning? And how much time do you expect to spend on remote learning weekly? All right, so at this time, Ophelia, Carmen, is there anything that you guys would like to share about scheduling? Or anything that came up in the chat that you would like to share?
No, I just put that out that they definitely have to also consider the kids that are working full time during the day. I just had a conversation with a young lady today. She's working 40 hours versus the 20 hours that she usually does. So scheduling maybe something after school time and the just offer that to some students.
Right. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. To support what Ophelia just said, it's very important for us to, like you said, also to have grace for these kids that are going through a lot right now that we may not know about. So it's important for us to also make ourselves available to them, you know, but also I realize that we all have our own lives and our own kids and our own situations, but be flexible and try to keep, you know, keep your office hours, because you don't know what's happening with the other classes. And like you said, Michelle, you don't want them to be in a position where they have to choose.
Yep. Thank you guys for contributing to that. All right. I think that's it for scheduling. There was a question about, do I have an example for high school? I don't have an example for high school, but you would follow the schedule that you have for your class periods, right? So if you teach English first period, have your English meeting, you know, on whatever day of the week you decide to have that meeting, have it during that time. It should follow your schedule. So if you teach block and you're teaching English, you know, Mondays and Wednesdays, have the meeting during the block time that you teach that class. For the secondary level, it's really important to follow that schedule, to follow your school schedule, because then the overlapping and conflicts occur. Okay, next we're going to talk about roles, the roles and responsibilities of everyone involved in the remote learning. There's a lot of text on the page, and I am not going to read that to you, but I do want to point out a few key words. The role of the, and just an FYI, this comes from icp.dateschools.net, so the instructional continuity plan. The teacher's role is for them to complete their lessons and their assignments for students with the strategies and the accommodations that are necessary. The teacher should have office hours. The teacher should provide resources and materials, and the teacher should communicate regularly with parents and families somehow. This is so important because, again, the students are with their parents and families all day. If the parents have no idea what's going on, that's, you know, that they're in the dark. And I can say that I have heard from 2 of my child's teachers for the past 3 weeks, or however long we've been in remote, you know, we've been in quarantine. So we want to find a tool and a way to communicate with parents and families regularly. As far as the students' role, they have to dedicate time. They have to make sure to check the online tools and platforms that you're using. So if you're using Microsoft Teams, the students need to check it every day to see what updates are there, or what assignments are posted, or, you know, what meetings are happening. They need to make sure they know their usernames and passwords. So this is why I pointed out before there were certain tools that required usernames and passwords. Think about the little elementary students. if they have multiple usernames and passwords to know, to memorize, to not to memorize, but to be able to get into so many different tools, that can become a little bit cumbersome. It can become a little bit overwhelming. But if you're using a tool that has a single sign-on access through the district, all they need to do is go to their portal and click on the link, and now they're in the tool. So it's important to make those small considerations, because it can really impact the end user, which would be the student. We want to really help them to identify a comfortable and quiet space to learn and study. And I'm going to use the word quiet very lightly, because we have students who may not have a quiet space. We have students who may now have to live with, or be, we're relocated into a space where they have lots of family members or young kids, so they don't have their own room and they can't go somewhere quiet. So we want to really be considerate of that, the least disruptive place for them to learn and study, right? Engage in online learning activities. They have to just participate and be engaged in what is being posted by the teacher. And of course, submitting all assignments by the due date established by the teacher. But again, we want to show some grace with those due dates, because you may have a student like Ophelia's student who's working 40 hours a week. That student might be the only person in the family that has a job because the parents lost the job. Okay, so the teacher ultimately creates, differentiates, and communicates. The student checks, engages, and submits. So in terms of the roles, what are your thoughts about the role of the teacher? Is there anything missing from the role of the teacher that you'd like to share in the comments, or anything missing from the role of the student that you'd like to share? How much time might a teacher need to accomplish the tasks for their role in terms of creating the assignments and the learning tasks, and finding the different ways to differentiate? And how can you help students and families meet their role requirements? So if there's anything that you guys want to share in the chat, Ophelia, Carmen, at this time, anything that you guys want to bring up, let me know.
No, not from me.
Okay, I'm always checking just in case. Okay. All right, so let's talk now.
Sorry, just a quick response. I think that we should also be cheerleaders in our absence, cheering them on to do whatever they can, and be resilient and resourceful and use what they have. Just be a cheerleader, I think.
I love that, being a cheerleader for our students. Absolutely. They need that. They need that support. They need that encouragement. So thank you for sharing that. Thank you, Mr. Campbell. Okay. So, so back to requirements. How do you plan to teach your students and manage your content? So this is like this is the meat, right? What are you sharing with your students? This is where compassion over content comes into play. So in that weekly schedule that was shared earlier, where you were doing different things each day, on Mondays, you would share like a weekly check-in or like a week at a glance. Here's an example of what, something that could be utilized for your students. And there's an article from Edutopia that talked about trying to say hello to your students frequently, making sure that, they know that you're there for them, you're thinking of them, you miss them. That kind of ties into what Mr. Campbell just said about being their cheerleader, right? So ways you can do that, check in with them. Maybe there is an activity called Roses and Thorns, again, from Edutopia. And the Roses and Thorns activity is where the students are just talking about what were your roses and your thorns for this week. The roses are things that happened that were good. The thorn is a challenge that they had. So just that kind of basic check-in with them is a great way for them to have an outlet to share with their classmates, to share with you, and you share with them as well. Also, being able to provide a week at a glance so they understand what's happening in class this week and can plan ahead, especially if they have a job. And again, that routine is there for them and the parents, so they can see what to expect. Okay. Another way to kind of engage students and, kind of bring that compassion into the classes, if you're using Microsoft Teams, you can have, what the recommendation is to have a fun channel. And the fun channel is just a way for the students to be able to share what's happening, during their weeks or their days, interact with each other, engage with each other. And, it can go a long way for all ages, because they're getting to have that humanity in the classroom, where it's not just do work and turn in work. Okay. You definitely have to have a way to give them assignments. I know, and I've heard from many teachers who's getting assignments turned in via email to them. So if you have 100 students and they're turning in a few assignments a week, you're getting hundreds of emails, right? So having a platform, and what you're seeing here is the example of Microsoft Teams. Having a platform that allows you to assign work to students individually, directly, and they also are able to submit assignments through that platform, is a lifesaver. With assignments in Microsoft Teams, you can create a new assignment. And remember, we talked about being able to add resources for differentiation or for scaffolding. So you are able to add resources, and that could be a resource that's a link to a website or a tutorial or a file that you have, a PDF, something that you're pulling from your OneDrive, something you can upload from your device. But you're able to attach all of these resources to an assignment. So if a kid needs the help, they can just, or a parent needs to help their child, they click on the resources and they can watch the quick video. And now they're able to synchronously do the work with the resources that you've provided. You can even add a rubric to help guide them to meeting the expectations for the assignment. And if you are thinking of assessments, formative assessments, summative assessments, well, mostly formative, you're definitely able to integrate Microsoft Forms as a quiz that you assign to a class in Microsoft Teams. And these forms would be auto-graded, meaning you wouldn't have to grade them, right? If you use OneNote, you're definitely able to integrate content that you put on a OneNote page in an assignment as well. It's kind of limitless in what you can do and what you can distribute and create and manage with assignments for students in Microsoft Teams. Okay. And in terms of assignments, I do want to show you this. This is from icp.dateschools.net, the Instructional Continuity Plan. And this is just giving you the resources that are available, your core materials. These are things that you can assign because they have graded activities. You can track progress and track on-time tasks with these things like Gizmo, iReady, iCivics, Mathia, Amplify, and so on. And then you have your supplemental resources like Achieve 3000, Myon, Khan Academy, NBC Learn, and so on. So you have all of these resources accessible to you, and they are also accessible through the portal, where the kids just click on the link in the portal. This is what the page actually looks like on icp.dateschools.net. So you see that it's broken down by grade level here on the left, and then subject area. And these little icons tell you what tools are recommended for the specific subject and grade level. So this is for the core subject areas. And then this next one is for electives and other programs. So again, all of this is accessible to you through icp.dateschools.net. Alrighty. So again, please be flexible when it comes to assignments and due dates, because you don't know what is happening in that child's household or the family's household, and we don't want to add extra burden to what they're going through at this point. Okay. All right, we're gonna jump into online meetings, and there are a couple things that we're going to go through for online meetings. So I'll be pausing in between because these online meetings are important. This is your way to connect with the students and your way to see them, see them all together. This is your synchronous opportunity to learn with the students. So before the meeting, you want to make sure you schedule the meeting however you're doing it. If you're using Microsoft Teams, you can schedule it in a channel. You can schedule it right there in the using the calendar app in Microsoft Teams. You can invite or alert students, like I said, by scheduling it in the channel. Recommended that you include an agenda so that the students and you have a plan of what's happening in the meeting, and adjust your meeting settings. This means you are having the students wait in the lobby, or having the students mute upon entering, or whatever it is. Sharing content during the meeting, that's very important. You should think about adding interactivity during the meeting. You should also think about chunking information, so there are opportunities for brain breaks and engagement of students. And then after, you could assign something after, whether it's a reflection, a poll, an actual assignment, but you definitely want to remind the students about the next meeting, and having that routine will help you because they would know, well, next week I'm meeting again on a Wednesday or a Tuesday or a Monday. Okay, so some basic considerations for online meetings. First, keep calm, take a deep breath. Remember, everyone is we're in this together, so you've got this. Think about your time frame for your meeting. It really shouldn't be longer than 50 minutes because that's a long time to have the students digest the content you're providing. And again, the whole intention is not to have them sit in front of a computer screen for hours in the day. The next thing you want to do is to leverage a familiar online tool like Microsoft Teams and PowerPoint during the meeting, right? Because you want to be able to share content with them. You want to have a clear agenda, and you want to send it to students beforehand. You want to chunk the lesson into 10 minutes of content or information at a time. The research says that you should give the students breaks with teaching based on their age. So content, brain break based on their age. Have some open-ended questions that you produce ahead of time so that you're able to post them in the chat for students to respond to, or you can use those open questions during a breakout activity that you have for that online meeting where students are working in small collaborative groups. And think about what other engagement and brain break activities you might want to include in your meeting. So here is kind of like how the meeting looks from start to finish. You can start your meeting with a welcome, reminders of online meeting rules. So what your netiquette, what your netiquette rules are, and an icebreaker. Maybe it's a quick trivia question that they can respond to in the chat. Then this is a recommendation, but have some aspect of collaborative note taking where the students can add to notes, and you can utilize the Microsoft Teams meeting notes that's available already in an online meeting, or you can provide a link to a collaborative Word document where students can contribute their notes to about whatever it is you're reviewing to that to those collaborative notes. Sharing content is important, because if you're sharing content on the screen, the kids are getting information. But remember to chunk the information being presented and leverage a tool like PowerPoint to present the information to students. You can also allow silent note taking. So after you complete maybe a topic from your list from your agenda, you can allow them a few minutes to add to their notes, or add to the collaborative notes, or post questions in the chat. And of course, you want to engage students, so you can include activities like a poll from Microsoft Forms. You can include a breakout room activity using Microsoft Teams, or just those open-ended questions in the chat. Those are just some examples of engagement tasks. You can also give brain break activities like playing Kahoot with them, or a quizzes game with them, or having them watch an Edpuzzle video, or maybe doing a Nearpod standalone collaborate board, or using the whiteboard feature, but just having those built into the lesson will really make it interactive. And then finally, you conclude the meeting with a recap. It's always good to have a recap. These are the things that we've talked about. Here are the main points that we've covered today, right? And you can talk to the students, be their cheerleader. Again, going back to Mr. Campbell, be their cheerleader. What did they do well? Call them out, call out what they did well. And then remind them about the next online class meeting and time. So again, these are just some recommendations for you to set up what your online meeting looks like. So some engagement options to consider. The first one is to turn up. So, using voice inflections. If your camera is on and you're actually engaging in conversation with them, hand movements, but you want to become a more active speaker because they're not seeing you if you're sharing content with them. And it may feel weird, but on the other end of the screen, it comes off better that way for the students. Gradual release, those models that we have, we can still utilize them somehow in the online meeting, giving the students autonomy to kind of go and here's your task, go. Finding connections or making connections to other subject areas, and having cognitive engagement through discussions that they're having, like in breakout rooms. And we're going to talk about breakout rooms next. Within Microsoft Teams, you could create private channels and assign no more than 4 students, because these breakout rooms should be small groups. You can post your discussion prompts or your learning task in those breakout rooms for students. And then during the class meeting, you just say, hey, students, you have 15 minutes or 10 minutes for your breakout room task. And then they will go to their respective breakout rooms because you would have already created the private channel and invited them to it. They will be in that room together. They will have their task and they can work on solving that problem, answering that question, or completing that mini assignment that you put in there for that breakout room activity. You do need to provide them a hard stop time, because remember, they're not going to be in the main online meeting because they're going to be in their breakout room. So they will have to return to the main online meeting. So give them a hard stop time so that everybody returns at the same time. And while students are working in the breakouts, you should be still present in the online meeting, the main meeting. So in case a student pops in to ask a question, you're there to help guide them. And then when students return to the online meeting, have different ways for them to share what their discoveries are or what their findings are. But breakouts are a great way to still have that level of collaboration and really add engagement to your online meetings. Okay, so that's all I have to share about online meetings. And I know it was a lot to digest, so we're going to take a quick pause for you to think about it. Are there any questions from Ophelia and Carmen in the chat that you would like to bring forth? Carmen, I noticed you made a comment about how they are feeling. You want to address that really quick?
Sure. If you are familiar with Teams, in Teams, there's a cool little feature where you can use GIFs in your thread. It's like a board and you just make threads on there. So you can ask kids before they start their meeting to go ahead and add a GIF of how they're feeling. Or if it has to do with maybe something you've read, maybe, for example, I'm starting Romeo and Juliet. So I'm already thinking about how can I use that so that when we meet, they can add GIFs that maybe pertain to what they thought of what happened in that scene or in the act. So that could be a cool little thing to add to the mix, you know?
Thank you, Carmen. Great
Okay.
suggestion.
All right, thank you.
All right, we got 5 more minutes. So virtual conferences are pretty simple. This is where the students would request to meet with you one-to-one. They can talk about their progress and things they don't understand. If they have accommodations, ESOL accommodations, SPED accommodations, gifted accommodations, or if you need to meet with them and their parents or families, virtual conferences are the way to go for that. So I would recommend creating registration forms for the students to be able to register and their families to be able to register for these virtual conferences. That way you can share a direct meeting link with them so that it is just you and them talking and no one else can join that meeting. That meeting link is only for the parent and student and you, and that's it. And your virtual conferences can be hosted once a week during your day for virtual conferences. So these are just two examples of forms that can be utilized for registration for virtual conferences. You're just asking them to select, you know, the time and the date that they want to meet with you. And if you're only doing it on a particular day, if you notice in the form here, it says Thursdays only, because that's your only day that you're using for virtual conferences. So that's the day that they would choose. Okay. And obviously you would have to share that link with them somehow, right? So if you're using Teams, you would post it in Teams. If you're using Remind, post the link in Remind. So finding a way to share with parents and students and families so that they can sign up for these virtual conferences. Another way to engage the students within the classroom is through discussion posts. And this is an example of the discussion post in Teams. It's always important to have very specific guidelines for them, not necessarily like, you know, what they're going to write, because the question should be open-ended, but having a structure, having a rubric. If you want them to write a certain number of words, just to make sure they're not answering yes and no, and if you want them to include textual support to make sure they're backing up what they're saying, make those requirements, have those requirements in your guidelines, right? So that the students see what you are asking of them to do. And then for assessments, depending on, you know, what you're doing, you may have to have assessments, and these can be in the form of like a discussion post, if it's formative assessment, online meetings, using a forms quiz, using Sway, PowerPoint, or even Flipgrid. So you have these different technology tools that integrate very well seamlessly with Microsoft Teams if you're using Teams, and you can include these for assessment purposes in your activities that you're having. And then for accessibility, in terms of providing strategies and accommodations for students, think about the tools that are out there, you know, Khan Academy, Kahoot, quizzes, Edpuzzle, Discovery Ed, NBC Learn. All of these things already have libraries built in, and you can pull from what's already there and give it to the students as a level of support for them, whether it's for remediation, review, acceleration, enrichment. It's just to support their learning. So now that we're here at the end of the requirements, think about how you plan to teach the concepts. Think about how you're going to segment your material to make it manageable. Think about your plan for assessment, and think about what you'll do for accommodations and providing strategies for students. Those are the 4 things I would think about at the beginning of every week when I'm coming up with my assignments for students to cover. Anything you guys want to share from the chat? The chat is on fire.
Hi, Michelle.
Hi.
Yeah, I would like to say that it's very important, especially right now, for us to keep it simple, just for our own sanity and for that of the kids. Because remember, as it was mentioned earlier in the chat, some of these kids have 6 to 8 classes that they're trying to manage their time for. So let's try to keep it simple. I know we're all overachievers. We all want to do the most we can, but it's very important to keep that in mind, that there's a lot going on at the same time.
Yep. Thank you, Carmen, for reiterating, keeping it simple. All right, so finally, we're here at rules. Think of netiquette, think of the rules that you want your students to follow when they're meeting with you online and when they're participating in chat. These things can be very simple, but they need to be reinforced and reiterated for students, right? Things like not typing in all caps, staying on topic, especially if they have access to GIFs and they have access to emojis and things. It may cause them to get off topic. So making sure these rules are established with students, and respecting privacy is very important. And of course, using that mute button is important too. It's important for us as adults, so it's definitely going to be important for students. And sharing with them that they should not stay confused. They can ask a question in the chat. They can ask a question out loud when you give them an opportunity to do so. All right. So these are just some tips that you would give to your students, some reminders. So reviewing the agenda, getting their materials, going to class on time, mute and turning off their camera, following netiquette rules, staying engaged, contributing to notes, ask questions, unmute to speak. And then at the end of the meeting, you can either end it for all or making sure that they exit at the end of the class meeting and are not there idling with other students. And then some quick troubleshooting tips, like if something isn't working, well, have they downloaded the app on the mobile device and on the computer? If they're using the online version, they may need to switch their browsers. They may need to sign out of the browser and the app and restart. They may need to restart the actual device. They need to make sure they check their Wi-Fi, make sure that they're logged in with their district credentials, make sure they're using the correct meeting link that you've shared, make sure they're muting and turning off their camera, and they can adjust their sounds and settings. So these are just some general rules, netiquette rules. You can add to them, but think about how you plan to use them, how you will share them with the parents and the families, and how you will stay connected to your students about these rules, and how do you plan to reinforce them when students get out of hand. All right, so that brings me to the end of the presentation. Just so you know, the resources that are here, the district has provided resources on Microsoft Teams. You can see there are all of these topics where self-paced webinars are provided. We'll share that in the chat. We'll share the link to the instructional continuity plan. We'll share the link to the distancelearning.dade school site. You have the helpline that's available to you on the days that you see on the screen, where students, parents, and you can call for help with distance learning, and they can direct you. And then there is also the Parent Academy. Very useful information is right here in the virtual campus on the Parent Academy. They have webinars geared toward parents and families in 3 languages: English, Spanish, and Haitian Creole. So parents could actually go on there and see the webinars that have already been published. There is one just on how to navigate Microsoft Teams if the parents are having trouble in the families with helping their child navigate Microsoft Teams. And of course, we'll share some Microsoft resources with you. You have Audrey's information here. And again, don't forget to boost the Ed Fund on social media. Thank you for joining. And at this time, we'll take questions for a few minutes from the chat. Audrey, I don't know if you want to chime in at this point.
Yeah. Hold on one second, guys. Before we get to the questions, while I still have everybody here, I just want to let you know we have another webinar tomorrow that's going to go over, as Michelle mentioned, some of the tools and tips for using the technology. And then next Tuesday, we're going to do one about YouTube videos. And a lot of teachers are asking for help with how to use YouTube and shooting a video, or even uploading something that already exists and using that as a lesson. So that'll be on Tuesday. Just keep checking our website. We are processing some grant applications. I don't know if any of you have already applied. We had to stop taking applications because it crashed our site. We're trying very hard to find more money to raise to provide you guys with webcams and microphones and those kinds of things. So just keep checking our website, and do please tag us on social media. It really helps us raise funds that we desperately need to put back into supporting teachers. So just take a minute and hit us up on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and tag Education Fund, please. I just can't tell you how much that helps us get money. And we need it now to help you guys. So does anybody have any other questions about any of the content today? Feel free to start asking in the chat box or unmute your mic.
Hello, Miss Audrey?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, hi, this is Precious. Thank you so much for offering this to us. And I also want to give a big shout out to Michelle. The information that you provided was amazing. I just wanted to offer a couple of suggestions for us all. Every single day when I'm working with my students, my heart is continuing to go out for my seniors. So like I have tried to find different ways to like help them to cope. And one thing that I always did in my class was this activity called reflections, where I literally would get in a circle with my students and like have them vent about whatever is going on. And being able to do like Zoom meetings has continued to allow me to do that with them. Also, just being able to have them check in, like it's really great for them to type something in, but when they are able to share like how they're feeling, their frustrations and everything, looking at someone, especially being able to look into the person's face, it has definitely helped them to kind of sort of fight another day for the sake of a lack of a meeting. I also want us all to be cognizant that many of them are going through a lot of different things. And if we can reach out to our trust counselors and give them information about students that may need our help, that would be really great. Many students are extremely comfortable with speaking to their teachers before they speak to a trust counselor. So I think now this is an opportunity for us to build so many bridges to help them to get through. My heart goes out to all of my students, but my heart is aching every single day for my seniors. It was really great that I love you talking about the virtual conferencing. So I have a venting session, and this is where all of my seniors jump in. They're like, "We can't go to prom, and we can't go to grad bash, and we can't do this." And I'm like, "Okay, I get it," and having them to gain perspective, having them to find the silver lining in certain things, although it may be extremely stressful. I think that we need to make sure that we are reaching out to them on those levels as well.
Yes, thank you for that about the trust counselor. That's a great resource that we probably aren't even thinking about to pull on at this point, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's great. Thank you, Precious. Any other questions, guys and gals?
I want to offer a little bit of a tip. Sorry, this is Audrey again. One of the things that we're getting a lot of requests for in our grant applications are for external hard drives. And you really don't need one because you have a cloud. Every teacher with your Microsoft 365 account has OneDrive. And Michelle, I'm hoping you can touch on that a little bit.
Absolutely, they do.
Yeah.
Everybody here in the district, students included, have access to OneDrive with they tell you a terabyte of storage space, but you really cannot fill it out. You can upload everything that you have and utilize the tools that are there in the OneDrive and access it anytime, anywhere. I would definitely utilize it now. Because you may have a meeting and you have to do it from your phone because your internet is down. And you could pull right from your OneDrive on your phone. So we really, at this point, the hard drives should be just a backup.
Right.
We really should be utilizing your OneDrive primarily. Sorry for the dogs.
Okay.
Mailman.
Well, just an FYI, if you did apply for a grant, you applied for a hard drive, we're going to not fund that because you have the ability. And we'd rather put that money towards somebody that needs, a microphone, noise canceling, that kind of thing. So, so take advantage of that OneDrive because it really does help you keep track of things. And another thing to use, a lot of teachers are asking if they can buy scanners. And there's a really good app that's available on your phone, and it's called CamScan. It's free. And you take a picture of whatever you were thinking you needed to scan, and it converts it into a PDF.
Can I cut in here really quick?
Absolutely.
They have access to Office Lens. Office Lens is connected to your Office 365. It's the same where you take a picture of a whiteboard, you take a picture of a sheet of paper, it can turn it into a PDF. Basically, Office Lens, you could take a picture on your phone and upload it to your OneDrive because it is connected. So I would highly recommend Office Lens if you're trying to take pictures of stuff to upload into Teams, for example. You can share this with parents. This is a great way, like if elementary kids are doing their work, handwriting their work, they need to take a picture and upload to a Teams assignment, take a picture with Office Lens, put it in their OneDrive and connect it to Teams. So I would recommend Office Lens. Let me see if I can find a link and put it in the chat for Office Lens.
Yeah. So we're going to start putting some of these tips up on our website as well. We'll have a new page going up with just some resources. And also, if you are using Zoom, be careful of the Zoom bombing that Michelle talked about. And there are articles out there on the internet that'll tell you how to avoid that. And we'll put that up on our page as well.
Oh, actually, I have Office Lens tomorrow in the tools and tips.
Wonderful. So come on back tomorrow.
Stay tuned tomorrow. I knew I had the information somewhere. It's in the presentation tomorrow.
Good. Okay.
All right. Any other questions, guys? Last chance. 5:10. We got to get off.
I think there's one more
Bye,
question in
everybody.
the
Thank
comment
you.
in the chat.
What?
There's one more question in the chat by Ms. Feldman. I usually save the, what was it? She needs help.
I usually save to desktop.
So with the OneDrive.
And then I upload to class file. Not sure how to use OneDrive. We can give you some, we could provide you with some links, or you could just search, go to YouTube and search. We'll provide you with a lot of links actually at right now, where you can go to the Microsoft EDU YouTube channel, and they have very quick tips on how to use all of these different tools. So that would be my recommendation. Go to the Microsoft EDU YouTube channel and just do a quick search. So if you're looking for OneDrive, just do a quick search and you'll see a video from OneDrive. So we'll put that here at the end of the chat, so you have access to those resources that were shared toward the end of the presentation, so that you have that to help you. All righty.
All right, everybody. Thank you again. We look forward to hosting you again tomorrow if you need more help. And again, you feel free to email me, and we're constantly looking for more ways to help you guys. We're going to have more grant opportunities up. And if you have ideas to lead a workshop at our expo next year, feel free to check our website. We're taking applications for that as well.
All righty. Hi, Miss Garcia, shouting out to a former pirate.
All right, everybody. We'll talk to you tomorrow. If you need anything, you know where to reach me. Take care and be safe.
Bye, guys.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Audrey, remember you can end meeting for all. Just click
Yes,
the
ma'am.
ellipses and click end all.
Yes, ma'am. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.